welcome back to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here for another week. I'm really, really excited because Joshua Barry returns to the podcast. And Joshua has been on the podcast before, as you can tell from what I've just said, but he was on the podcast June in 2024. And so not so long ago, but Joshua has some very exciting updates for us, and we have a lot to cover. The last time he was on, it was episode 183, and the episode was called Challenging Beliefs, Dare to be Naive, featuring Joshua Barry. So let me remind you who he is, and then we'll jump right into the episode. Joshua Barry is a world-class facilitator of change. As an author, speaker, entrepreneur, and director of Econic, Joshua has spent the last 2 decades evolving the what, who, and why of Fortune 500 companies and venture-backed startups. For employees and leaders looking to grow themselves and their organizations, Joshua speaks on overcoming limiting beliefs, adaptive leadership, and the innovation systems and mindsets that create engines for growth. So, of course, I'll link where you can find Joshua and Econic and all of that fabulous information that you might need in order to connect. But in the meantime, Joshua, welcome back. Thanks so much for being able to join and being open to rejoin. So glad to have you back.
Happy New Year, Tracy. Excited to be back with you too.
Amazing. Well, I don't want to share the big news, but you do have some big news for the listeners.
Yes, absolutely. So the last time I was with you, Tracy, you helped poke some ideas, and we got into thinking about words and the meaning of words, and we could talk about those later. But that kind of snowballed into a TED Talk that I was hoping to get chosen for. Eventually got chosen for that, and I delivered that TED Talk to a full audience in Omaha, Nebraska in November of 2024. And that talk should be released soon, but it has big implications for truly bringing the human back into human resources and artificial intelligence and a bunch of other things we can get into. But I really just wanted to come back to say thank you, Tracy, for poking and dislodging something in my brain and my heart that turned into what hopefully people will see as a provocative idea that's worth spreading.
Oh my gosh. First of all, you owe me no thanks, but I will say you're welcome because I was raised not to be rude. When someone says thank you, you say you're welcome. No, you really, I'm making light of this, but you really don't owe me anything. It was such a pleasure having you on. It's why I'm so excited that you're back. And I'm really excited for you. I mean, a TED Talk is kind of like, that's the thing. Like if we're not doing anything else, like we should probably want to have a TED Talk at some point in our lives. And you've done it. That's so amazing. I can't wait for it to come out.
Thank you. It definitely was on the bucket list. And it was something that at the beginning of the year, I truly set forward a couple of ideas and goals. And so the fact that was able to happen, I'm excited. And we'll see how it's received, right? That's always the thing. So
totally. Well, knowing you now for the better part of, what is that, about 8 months now? No, more than that, maybe 9 months, considering we spoke before we recorded. I think that it will be received very well. And, something that I really appreciate about what you do and what you bring also to this audience is that you emphasize the importance of things that matter. Like we're talking like words, for example. And sometimes people, I think, undervalue the value of words or what we can do with the things that we say or how we say them. I mean, I'm asked, for example, all the time about bringing the human back to human resources, where that came from. And it's like, well, it's in the name, right? So when we think about the power of words and coming back to also just what you stand for and what you've done, I mean, can you take us through, or like, can you give us a slight preview into the TED Talk or
sure.
what that was about? Yeah.
Yeah. My pleasure. It came from the realization that, as you said, we use a lot of words without even thinking about them, or more importantly, truly understanding the implications that they have. Earlier in my career, I led sales and marketing teams, and we would constantly be talking about our prospects and our leads and how to put people in a better funnel. And oftentimes we're talking about listeners like those to your podcast, right? Like who actually wants to be put into a funnel or to be
Totally.
prospected or targeted or any of those things? And yet those are words we just throw out. And what I explore in the talk is that unfortunately, just copying and pasting those words that were used before us, we sometimes start to rationalize behavior that we wouldn't normally take if the person was sitting right on the other side of a screen,
Mhm.
like you are to me, Traci, right? And that
Yeah.
extends into human resources, right? When we start to think about headcount as just a number or people as an expense to be controlled or others, we start to dehumanize. And
Yes.
truly, dehumanization is one of the first steps towards even worse actions that can come from that. So I get into all of that in my TED Talk in a nice little bite-sized 10-minute
Oh my gosh.
entertaining
Wow. Well,
monologue.
my next question would be, how do you do that in 10 minutes? I mean, but it's the power of words. I mean, that's so amazing. And it's really powerful. You're right. When like I'm thinking about, first of all, let me take a step back because I'm about to ramble if I don't. When I think about one of the main functions within HR, especially when you're starting to work on strategy and things like that, you are analyzing people.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're analyzing people, you eventually get to a place where you're analyzing people as numbers, to your point.
Mm-hmm.
And the bigger the company, the easier it is to remove yourself from what that number represents, who that number represents, and who that person actually is. And so when you talk about dehumanizing, it is it is so real. And you know, the thing is, it's so beyond just business. Like
Mm-hmm.
when anyone or anything is dehumanized, I mean, it's kind of like the breakdown for everything, right? So when we keep the focus on the human and we do our best, because of course it's unrealistic to think, oh, well, we're going to look at every single person as a human when we're analyzing big things. Sure, fine, no problem. But it's like when I think the most important point in all of that when a company is analyzing people is once you come to the point where you're making a decision about those people that you reframe it. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
you have 10,000 people that you are going to lay off. Well,
Mm-hmm.
who are those 10,000 people? Who are they made up of? You know, like what comprises that group of people? Do they have children? Are they on the benefits? Like what kind of resources are they
Yeah.
going to need? You know?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
What you're hitting on is I'm not saying like remove all of that language. What what I advocate for is just being more intentional about the language that we're using and not just using unconscious words because
Mm,
uh, a mentor of mine, Ari, once told me that words are just a symptom of our conscious or unconscious beliefs, right? And oftentimes
yeah.
when we throw out those words, like you said, we got to lay off, we got to right size, we got to streamline,
The buzzwords.
any of those sorts of things, that may be true, and it may actually be necessary for a healthy organization going forward. Let's say, uh, and yet. Um, Maybe those words are actually representative of some underlying unconscious or unspoken belief about the replaceability of people within a system that you're working in. Okay. I at least want people to be cognizant of that.
Totally.
At least be intentional that, okay, that's what I think. And then back to what we talked about in episode 183. There are things you gain and there are things you lose by holding that particular belief. And so I just want people to wake up a little bit more to the consciousness of that, especially in today's day and age with artificial intelligence,
Mhm.
and the power that our words have on shaping our future through AI.
Mhm. Oh my gosh, yes. And actually, when I think about AI and words, my initial thought, and this is probably just because I just bought a minivan and it came up, and I promise you I'm going to make the connection. And I'm really excited about the minivan, by the way, even though I'm so much cooler than what a minivan necessarily like kind of portrays. I'm
You're
so
redefining the
excited.
minivan, Traci. You're going to redefine it.
I really am. Like, I am really changing the game for minivans. I'm just saying, if Toyota wants to sponsor me, I got the Sienna. I'm so excited. I'm gonna make the connection here in a moment. When I think about AI, my first thought, because of my experience buying the minivan, is the what we ask AI if we're using
Mhm.
generative, like, language, with, like, let's say ChatGPT. And
Mhm.
I think about that because it's kind of a perfect example of, like, what you give to AI can sometimes be what you receive. It's not
Yeah.
necessarily thinking beyond the scope of what you might mean, what your context
Yes.
might be, right? And so I share the minivan anecdote because when my husband and I were going to buy it, they were like, and, according to Google, this is like the percent above MSRP that it should be. We're like, above MSRP for a minivan? And no offense, minivans, but I love you. Um, and the question was, how what percentage above MSRP is the Toyota Sienna or the minivan? I'm
Yeah.
like, well, of course it's going to tell you a percent above MSRP because you're asking it to tell you the percent above. But if you ask what the average price of a Toyota, like, that might not be above MSRP. So this is a very, very nuanced example, but that's the way I take kind of what you're saying in terms of, like, how we think about nuance and language when it is related to AI, and that might not be your intention, but
No, no, no. It's exactly a flavor of my intention in that, as you said, large language models that power tools like ChatGPT or Anthropic's Claude
Mhm,
or Microsoft Copilot, et cetera, are all built on studying and ingesting and training on immense amounts of data and text and images and music and everything that can go into it. And in a response to your prompt, which you very much
mhm,
have control over, the agent will do its best to be able to predict what the right response should be to what you're saying. But it's all based upon previous patterns that it's seen in the training data. And so you're right. If they've asked 1,000 times what percent above MSRP is this van, the 1,000th and first time is likely going to give that back. And that's my intent of marrying this being conscious about your words, especially in human resources and AI,
mhm, mhm.
because as publicly available sources of training data are exhausted, companies are routinely turning more and more towards private, or at least once gated sources of information
Mm,
for training their models. And so when you start to think about the last ways that you described people in your emails or Microsoft
mhm,
Teams messages or blog posts or other things. And there's a million examples of treating people like a resource in those previous ones. Like, what do we expect AI is going to predict the value of people is beyond that? And so I think we're at a very interesting inflection point where we can start to shift the narrative even of what generative AI thinks about people, right? And their value based upon the conscious word choice that we have.
yeah, ooh, this is really important because everyone, of course, rightfully so, is talking about AI, and AI will continue to be a part of the conversation naturally because it's our future, it's our present, it's just, what is important in today's day and age, but how we use it and having a better understanding of, I guess, just generally, like, how we can best use it, what the best use case is, makes a lot of sense.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm very much a pro AI and being intentional in its use case. And just being, as I said even before, whether we had AI or not,
Yeah.
being a little bit more aware of the types of word choices that we're using and the implications that they have and how those choices impact our actions and behaviors.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. I was just talking to someone in HR who, I kind of said like, "Hey, what do you think about this fear that people have with like AI taking their jobs?" Basically. And this was not in a recording. It was like an intro call because I like to, see what I can get out of people, because these are the questions that people have. And she was like, "Oh, well, it's totally true. AI is going to replace jobs." And this is like, ahead of people. And I was like, "Oh," like I was kind of taken aback because part of me, like, I get it. Of course,
Hmm.
there are jobs that are at risk. And then the other part of me is like, well, how do we see AI as a resource to better fulfill our jobs so that we're not as much at risk? But that is not something that you can cover in a 10-minute conversation. And so I wonder, like, from your perspective and how, I guess really relating it to being very cognizant of what we say and how we say it, especially in HR, how would you answer? I'm putting you in the hot seat here, I'm so sorry.
Oh
But
yeah.
how would you, like, answer that if someone's like, "I'm really worried that AI is going to take my job. I'm an HR admin. I'm an HR manager. I'm an HR whatever. And I'm really worried that AI is going to take over my job." Maybe it's someone in recruiting. What do I do to how do I
Yeah.
navigate using AI without putting myself in a position where it's doing my job instead of me doing my job with AI? Like, is there a way that we answer that? Or maybe it's on the other side of things where, like, what would you say to an HR person who's like an HR leader who's confronted with that and has to navigate answering that question? Like,
Sure.
either perspective, I'd love to
Sure.
hear.
Yep. So the first thing that comes to mind is I believe you called out in some of your 2025 HR trends the need for adaptability, for evolving, for continuous skill development. Uh, I think that all very much applies here uh,
Mm,
because the individual or the leader who's thinking about the application of HR in their workflows or job tasks for their people, just like digging in your heels and resisting likely isn't going to work.
mm,
um,
mhm, mhm.
the better approach is to start to understand, okay, what are some of the ways that if I had, this was, I think, the best descriptor somebody said, if I had infinite interns at my disposal, what would I be
Amazing.
able to do? And because at least for now, at least some of the abilities are around that
Yeah,
level, and
yeah.
so you need to think about
That's a fabulous example.
things on a different level of scale. And so
Yeah.
if you were basing, let's your to your HR admin role, like if you were basing your job value on the ability to know all of the policies and how to implement them and how to adjudicate them, and being a resource know-how person, that is something that could probably be replaced eventually. Probably not the relational side of things.
Mhm.
Um, but even there, I'll start to challenge that some younger generations would actually probably prefer to interface with a non-person for some of that information. And so you are left with thinking, what are the additional skills or other things that could continue to add value around that? Because if it's just information retrieval or analysis, that may not be as
Mm.
helpful going forward. And so a simple way to also answer this is just start experimenting. Find ways that are either corporately responsible, if you can, or off on the side on your own personal things, to at least start to practice with some of these tools so that you can have a better understanding of what they're capable of, and practice that curiosity. And yeah,
Yes.
consider the thought exercise: if I had infinite interns, what
I
might I
love
be capable of?
I love that so much, and it's really true. As a former intern myself, that is exactly where like, AI is. I shouldn't just say ChatGPT, it's really any AI tool that we're using because I guess depending, I think of these what is the phrase? It's not, generative I guess it is generative AI, right? That's
Yes.
what I'm thinking
Yep.
of, yeah. So, with any generative AI tool that I have used, and I've used a few, anything that I kind of put in, it is kind of, it's a little sophomoric. It's delivering information based on limited or certain amount of data and with limited experience so far. And I can only
Mhm.
imagine once generative AI turns 30, how how much more, or maybe even 40 or 50 or 60, like how much more it will be able to do. And then when you were sharing about, you know, not resisting so much and really basically embracing this technology, it makes me think about the phrase keep your friends close, keep your enemies closer. Because even though I don't believe that AI is the enemy at all, I really don't. I say that to be very tongue in cheek. It's
Yeah.
kind of like this idea that you could find yourself in a position where technology could do a certain job. I don't think that
Mhm.
it's going to be able to do like, at least within HR, especially from the relationship side. That's still a very important part of what we do, is build and maintain those relationships. And so it's like, well, if it's doing all of these other things that actually help us to repurpose our time that was once spent doing heavily administrative things, it's kind of like you're keeping it closer. Once you embrace it, it's not this thing that you have to work against anymore. It's this thing that you're working with and that's empowering you, enabling you, hopefully, in your job to do more, to upskill, to adapt. I appreciate that you referenced the 2025 HR trends episode, because that's kind of what I'm hoping to invoke throughout the rest of this year, is that like AI doesn't have to be the enemy. It's
Yeah.
something that we really can kind of leverage. It's a tool at the end of the
Yeah.
day.
Yeah. So our core business is custom training and development programming, whether it's leadership development programming to certain specific skills or behaviors. We use it quite often to help make us better facilitators and curriculum designers and experienced people. Uh, so if you start to think about it as a tool of not just go find this for me or research this for me, but instead, here's an outline for an experience. Why won't this work?
Mhm.
Right? Or you start using it in a coaching, challenging, make me better sort of way. I think you can unlock then a whole nother level of potential value out of a tool like that. Um, here's even a silly, maybe it's a meta example of this, is if you're the HR admin and you had your job description, you could put it into one of these tools and say, which of these tasks are most likely to be taken over by AI in the future
Which
and
job? Yeah,
why? And then
right.
teach me why. And then what are some things I could do? Like use the tool
So
for
great.
itself, right?
Yes. I think that's great advice. And I really like what you shared in terms of this idea around brainstorming. Like,
Mhm.
you don't need to tap the shoulder of your coworker when you've got an AI brain readily available to you, and to think about, like, asking it, well, what wouldn't work about this? What am I missing? What are
Mhm.
my blind spots? I mean,
Yes.
I think of so many use cases for that. And as I always share on the podcast, that, I'm the first to admit that I move really fast, most of the time too fast. I like don't always like notice like the fine details because I'm moving so fast, and like execution, execution, execution. And I find chat like I AI, generative AI, and I tend to use ChatGPT the most. I find it to be extremely helpful to be aware of my blind spots. Like,
Mhm.
what question am I not asking? What am I missing about this like really important topic? And whether it's for my podcast or for work, I mean, it just tends to be, to me, like an additional brain,
There
something
you go.
that will allow me to think more or more deeply about something that I otherwise would probably miss unless I asked someone else, and hopefully they wouldn't miss it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
I'm into it.
Great topic. We can keep digging
Oh
into
yeah.
this, and again, how it all ties back to that TED talk. I
Hmm.
think that we can use and leverage the power of AI to also bring more human back into human resources in the
Mhm.
workplace, because our intentional usage each time, hopefully, each time, hopefully, a transcript from your podcast is getting put into training data. I hope it's getting smarter and more pro-human
I hope.
in all the thoughts,
That would
right?
be kind of cool. Yeah. I hope. And actually, it makes me think of another question for you here, which is, when you think about AI and the human, let's say humanizing work more, humanizing the workplace more, are there strategies that maybe people who struggle with this, like people who really tend to lose sight of the human element, are there strategies that you would advise they take or follow when it comes to using AI in order to ensure that they're not inadvertently dehumanizing?
Yeah, I think that one can be more how you are using it for coaching, right? Just being
Mhm.
conscious about the questions that you're asking and why, right? And so back to the idea of not putting in anything that you wouldn't want to see on the front page of the newspaper.
Totally.
Just being cognizant of that and how a lot of that data is being used. We were doing a workshop on adaptive leadership at one of the big companies out there that also has an AI product that may sit by your side. We'll just call it that. And they too were thinking about and saying, like, we believe that Big Brother is always watching our stuff that we're putting into here because we are the makers of this
Hmm.
tool. And so I think just being conscious about that can maybe keep some of it into check, especially because you have another lens that your words might actually be perpetuating a different world in the future that could have ramifications beyond
Yeah.
what you've thought. And then the other is maybe a very practical use of how you can start to humanize your work a little bit more is to ask whatever AI tool you're using things like, here's the email I'm about to send. How might this be received by someone? Or ask empathy driven questions to give you feedback, right? And this has helped me, I'm sure, send out some emails that were landed a lot better than the one. So
Mhm.
the old thing in the past of like write your email if you're mad and then delete it,
Yes.
or
And then
write your
delete it.
email if you're mad and then leave it in your drafts for
Yeah.
24
You're not
hours or whatnot.
exactly. Yep.
You could potentially also do that here and say, like, this is what I'm going to send. How might this be received? Help me come up with a more empathetic way to share this through A, B, or C. Should I even send this email, right? Like, there's different ways that you can, if you think about it from a coaching standpoint. Um,
Yeah. Makes a lot of sense.
the other piece, I don't know if you use this, but there is the setting. For instance, I also use ChatGPT as my primary one. There's a setting where you can have almost like the master prompts in your settings, and you can put in
Oh.
specific things. Like you could actually say, if I am referring to people in a dehumanizing way, call me out on it. And you
Oh,
can
I
put
did
some
not
of
know that.
those master prompts in there.
Oh,
You, you're not, maybe you're not using this. Hey, well,
no.
we need to teach you.
I know. I feel like I know what you're talking about, and I've probably ignored it.
Hmm.
Which I
That's
should.
okay. If you go into
Yeah, tell me.
I probably can't screen share, can I? But
I
when I'm
think
in
you
Chat
can
GP,
actually.
can
Let's
I?
see. Yeah, I think you
Oh
can. Do you
boy,
see share and then
I
screen?
do. But now
Oh,
then you're going
we're
to
in
see
the
we're in the thick of it,
we're
and now
in
you're going to
yeah, we're
see
in it.
all of
For those
my.
who are watching on video, they're gonna really be in for it
Oh
now.
boy, and now you're going to see all my search terms. I don't even see what I have.
That's
Okay.
really funny.
When I am over in the right here and
Hmm.
I go into customize ChatGPT,
Hmm.
I can start to see things
Oh no, I
like
have not seen this.
what should it call me? What traits? So I put treat me
Oh,
as an expert. Consider new technologies. No
oh,
moral
amazing.
lectures. Like list URLs at the end of your response. You
Oh,
can add a
fun.
number of these things in here to help you have it. And so in there, you could put something like, if ever I am sounding dehumanizing, like call me out on it.
Oh my gosh. Well, listen, I First of all, I learned something new today. Thank you. I can
You're
officially go
welcome.
home. The day is over. Funny,
You're not
funny
home
enough,
already,
I'm home.
Tracy?
Yeah,
What?
I'm home. I'm home. I can just close my laptop and be done. Thank you for that. Secondly, I think you probably taught a lot of people something new today. So thank you for that.
Welcome.
I mean, first of all, everyone learned hopefully something new before you shared your screen. But now, after really being able to see how we can make this technology work for us in the best possible, humanly possible way. I
Mhm.
mean, that's really cool. Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Amazing. Well, I don't know any better way to leave this episode and conclude, but all I know is that I want to congratulate you again on your TED Talk. I can't wait for it to come out. Hopefully it'll be out by the time this episode is. Otherwise,
That would be great.
we will keep all of the listeners um, totally informed, and we'll get it shared in the newsletter once it's out. I'm just so excited for you. I can't think of anyone better to do a TED Talk and any better
Aw,
topic. I think it's awesome.
that's sweet. Yeah, thank you so much, Tracy. I appreciate your curiosity and obviously for showing up every week and putting out great content like this to keep bringing even more humanity back into the workplace. So thank you for your work.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. It is truly my pleasure. And with that, I will remind everyone that Joshua's links and everything that you might need in order to connect or learn more about Econic or Joshua in general are in the show notes. So please click along and don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. Joshua, thank you so much again. Second episode in the books. That just means you have to come back
Boom!
again
Lucky
in a
number
year.
3. There's a special jacket, some swag, maybe.
Exactly. Ooh, that'd be fun. Don't tempt me with a good time. I love swag. Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Tracy.
Hey, just before you go, don't forget to subscribe to this show so that you are the first to hear when an episode drops each week. And maybe leave a 5-star review and a comment about how much you loved this episode. Plus, if you have someone in mind who would really enjoy this episode, make sure you share it with them. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you next week.